Unautomatable You, I know that's a very pretentious title. I think it will make sense by the end of this talk. As you've heard from my robotic friend, my name's Hywel. I have a background in technology, and my career has been around founding technology companies, leading them, around advising technology leaders. And I think I need to start with a disclaimer that I do genuinely love AI. It might not sound like that as we go through the talk. My background includes quite a bit of AI and machine learning. And I think the reason I love it is because as a developer, the exciting thing I always found was you would write some code and you would build a new behavior and then you would try it and it would actually work. And that was often a pleasant surprise. AI and machine learning take that to the next level where you design the system that's capable of making the behaviors. And then when they actually work, it's even more of an exciting surprise. To me, machine learning kind of amplifies all of the things I love about writing code. But as artificial intelligence has become more prominent in my work, it's made me question which bits of my work can't be replaced, which bits of my work must stay human first, where we aren't replaceable by AI versions of ourselves. And I think this is necessary because laziness genuinely is a real virtue a lot of the time. It lets us save effort for things where effort is better expended. Laziness is a good thing, and automation tempts us to be lazy. This is a real road sign. The top of this sign says, no entry for heavy goods vehicles, residential site only. The bottom of the sign is in Welsh. It translates as, I am not in the office at the moment, send any work to be translated. Automation is great, systems are great, but they give us this temptation to not think properly, to not question what we're being told. I want to convince you that there are parts of our work that can never be automated, that will become more important over time. And I want to tell you how I think we can improve those skills right now. First, I'm curious whether anyone has read this book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I see a few hands. Okay, cool. You might still have seen the film that was based on the book, Blade Runner. Show of hands. Way more people. Okay, the book is also good, but fair enough. So Blade Runner, 1982 film directed by Ridley Scott. Here is the basic idea, which is pretty much the same as the book. The world has very advanced AI now. It has become so advanced that we have androids. They're called replicants in the world of the film. They're very realistic. They're very similar to humans. And as our story begins, a team of 6 replicants on a mining planet has overthrown the humans who are overseeing them and returned to Earth in a kind of state of freedom. And that's important to our story because in this world, while the androids are very similar to humans, they're really treated as subservient. They are mechanical slaves. So the police want to find them and cover your ears tight, and they want to kill them. That is our hero's job, and this is our hero. This is police officer Rick Deckard, played here by Han Solo. He is this cyberpunk future cop. He is out there hunting for replicants. The world is gritty. The world is difficult. We empathize with Rick. We care about this character because we see bits of his life that we identify with. And his job is hard. The replicants are so realistic, they are hard to identify. And so he has to use a special test. That test looks like describing a scenario and then measuring a response. So he will sit down with someone who's presumed to be a replicant and say something like, you're sitting watching TV and suddenly you discover a wasp crawling on your wrist. And what he measures for in his test is empathy. Empathy is the difference. It is the difference between the humans and the AIs, because the humans have it and the AIs don't have it and fundamentally cannot have it. It's also the thing that we cannot simulate. It's the thing that we can't delegate to AI, and it's the part of you that can't be automated. I want to convince you of that. Obviously, I'm talking about a story here. The book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Blade Runner, the film, those are not real. I know that, don't at me. But could LLMs, could generative AI, in theory, be empathetic? My brief answer is no, they can't. They can be sympathetic because sympathy is about words and words and actions. It's about the things that people say or do to you. But empathy is about feeling. It is about experiencing emotions. And while we can simulate the results of feelings, we can't simulate the feelings themselves. We can make a robot that cries, we can't make a robot that actually feels sad. And that's not the same thing. Those are fundamentally different. Because we care about people being invested in us, we don't just care that someone cries because of what we're telling them, we care that they feel sad because of what we're telling them. It's not just about words or actions. And while there are parts of our jobs that are technical, parts of our jobs that are commercial or organizational and cognitive, we have intellectual problems to solve, AI might be able to do all of those things. But there are other parts that are social, that are relationship-based, that are interpersonal, and those are based on fuzzier concepts like trust and inspiration, which build on this idea of empathy. So when parts of our work get reduced and automated away from us, what remains will be more of our time, it will be things that we should care about more, and it will be where our biggest source of leverage is. Now, I don't think empathy is unique in this. I think there are a group of qualities that are kind of similar that we value in relationships. Excuse me, things like trust and attention and time and inclusion and respect. I don't think we value these things just because they help us. I think we value them before we even benefit from them. I think we value these things because they cost the other person something. Someone has to use up their time. They have to show humility. They have to take effort. They have to care in order for them to provide these things to us. And what that means is that there aren't shortcuts to them, because if you fake them, they lose their value. And I think in a world where AI is more dominant, we will value these things more. The more we automate, the more we will care about the things that cannot be automated. Oh, good, my clicker. There we go, it's working now. Now, I keep talking about empathy. I should define it clearly because I think it's kind of a fuzzy term. Different definitions do exist, so I tried to find a review that would unify them. This is from an academic paper. I will summarize it in a moment. But essentially, empathy is an emotional response that is automatically elicited, which is similar to a stimulus emotion, but where you know that the source of the emotion is not your own. My layperson reading of that is that empathy is feeling someone else's emotions while realizing that they are not your emotions. A machine that cannot feel cannot be empathetic. And if we care about empathy, this is something that we cannot safely outsource. Empathy is kind. I think it's a great thing to be kind. I'm all for kindness, but there is also a very pragmatic reason to be empathetic, and that's because it changes outcomes as well. Doctors who are empathetic have a more positive effect on their patients. Empathetic people tend to have happier relationships that last longer, where conflict is more productive. Empathy correlates with being a more supportive friend, and in the workplace, more empathetic, more psychologically safe workplaces get 50% more productivity, roughly twice as many people who can be innovative at work, more than twice as many people who are engaged at work, and roughly 3 times as inclusive. My point here is that empathy gets results. It is a high leverage skill, a high leverage practice to have. And I think the reason why is that empathy builds social bonds. It makes you a better manager, it builds more trust in the people who report to you, but it also helps you understand others and to change your actions appropriately. Like, what are your competition going to do? How should you negotiate with that supplier? What do they even care about? Why are those 2 people in your team disagreeing so strongly? And why does the CEO seem to care so much about this one thing? Empathy, that ability to feel other people's positions, gives you the leverage to answer those questions better. I hope to have convinced you that you can't use artificial intelligence for everything. So where is that line? Where do you decide this is somewhere where I can use AI and this is somewhere where I shouldn't? I have a simple test that I'm going to propose for you, which is whether you're comfortable telling the other person that you used AI to do something. If you ask yourself this, I think it gives you the answer about whether it's kind of safe to use AI or whether this is an area where people care about the effort you've put in. These are all real examples I've heard. I didn't bother watching your presentation. I just generated a summary and read that instead. I'll send my digital twin to our one-to-one because I'm busy then. I generated your performance review. That one makes me particularly nervous. Ask your AHR director before you do this, please. I got distracted during our conversation to make sure my AI assistant wasn't waiting for me to answer it. Like, I wanted to unblock the AI assistant more than I wanted to be in the conversation with you. This is an empathy-based test. If you would feel uncomfortable saying to someone that any one of these statements, that is probably because you are empathizing with how they will receive what they're hearing. These are all areas where AI can be perfectly correct. It can not hallucinate. It can fulfill the task. It can do it in the tone that you specified and still be harmful to use. So I think now is the time to be strengthening our empathy. Typical work has gotten more remote. Typical work has involved AI more. It has led to more isolation in the way that we work. And I think that means the human side of work is going to matter more as the cognitive side gets more automated. So this is the moment. This will look different for different people though. A quick aside on this, except the clicker does not want to progress to the next slide. It's flashing like it's working. Oh, there we go. Cool. So not everyone experiences empathy in the same way or exhibits it in the same way. Statistically, in 20 to 30% of the folks in this room and the teams you lead will have autism. And there is a stereotype that people with autism cannot do empathy. I think that's worth addressing because it's not true and I think it's harmful. But people with autism might exhibit their empathy differently. They might appear calmer. They might offer practical advice instead. They might show their empathy through actions or take extra time to process what they're hearing. This is still an empathetic response, but it might be different to your own and it might be different to the people that you're talking to. And so that might mean that it isn't recognized as empathy. So if you have autism, if you work with people who have autism, it might be worth having that conversation about the way you are exhibiting empathy so that you understand each other better. We are all responding to changes right now in AI and automation. I think there are more changes coming. So I want to give some small things, some ideas for you to do that I'm doing myself in order to try and prepare for a future where empathy and those interpersonal skills matter even more than they do today. Firstly, I want to recommend that you read fiction. Not just any fiction, fiction with rich emotional lives. You can listen to audiobooks too, but the idea is the same. In the real world, we do not get to see someone else's entire story. We don't get to experience everything that led up to this point and understand the emotions that they are going through at a given time. Reading fiction does give you that. This is a way to learn to be more empathetic in the real world. It gives you a way to understand others, see their experiences, and feel their emotions as a result. If you read fiction, you can grow your empathy. My second bit of advice for you is to cultivate curiosity without advocacy. This is just a good skill to have anyway, I think. When people disagree, we often tend to move straight to a mode where we try and convince and explain. We often think, oh, well, if this other person just knew what I know, then they would agree with me and we could all just move on with my correct thoughts. Instead, we should try to learn. We should try to understand why they disagree with you. What have they seen that you haven't? What do they believe that you don't believe? What do they know that you don't know? Don't push your own ideas unless asked. Don't correct them. Ask them what they've seen that's led them to their conclusions and how their thoughts have changed over time. This comes with some caveats. I think there are places where people disagree because the other person is a bigot. If you are talking to someone who is like a racist or a homophobe or a transphobe, particularly if they're bigoted against you, feel free not to be interested in their position. In the rest of the time, though, in most other cases, I think it is useful and interesting to find out why people disagree, and it helps to grow our empathy. My third bit of advice is to go beyond small talk. Small talk is a thing that we do to break the ice. It's a way to start the conversation off, like, how was your weekend? When I say go beyond that, I really mean ask questions that have some kind of emotional component. I'm not saying we have to be everyone else's psychotherapist, but I think just asking, was that trip fun? Is that a thing that you're passionate about? Did you do that with some friends? How long have you known those people? We're just trying to gently understand people and share in their emotions if they're willing to share. Piece of advice number 4 is to practice active listening. I think there are 2 parts to active listening. The first part is about listening to understand. Sometimes we just listen to wait for a gap in which to disagree. Sometimes we listen to work out how we're going to disagree. This first part is kind of similar to being curious without advocacy, as I was talking about a couple of slides ago. The second part is about thinking hard about what you are hearing. So hard that you find yourself involuntarily nodding along with the person that you're listening to, or grimacing when they tell you something bad that happened, or smiling when something good happens. Those kind of facial expressions that happen kind of naturally when you're listening hard are part of an empathetic response to what someone else is saying. You can also show processing in what you say back to them, so that you are genuinely responding to them and building on the thing that they last said. Doing active listening forces you to be empathetic because it makes you focus on what someone is saying so much that you start to experience it as well. My last suggestion for you: we are sometimes encouraged to be detached at work. We are sometimes told that there's this idea of professionalism, which is kind of the opposite of showing emotion or kind of caring about things. As we have seen, empathy is actually a way to achieve more at work and to get more stuff done and to be more productive and to be more successful at work. So I don't buy the idea that professionalism and empathy are in conflict with each other. If you can show emotion at work, that will not only deepen your relationship with the people around you, but it also, especially if you are in a senior leadership position, it also makes it much easier for other people to be vulnerable and to show emotion back to you. So if you're more senior, this probably starts with you. It helps to build empathy. If you allow emotions, other people can show theirs as well. Again, nothing extreme here. I'm not talking about trauma unloading on the people around you. I just mean saying things like, I love it when we ship projects on time, or I'm really excited to go and tell this person what a great job you've done. Here is a summary. This is intended as the easily memorable slide that summarizes the stuff that I was just talking about. Empathy is very important to me, as you might have guessed, as a leader. I'm the founder of a company called SkillAware. We do a very human-focused approach to learning in software teams. And learning is something that is fundamentally human and that we know improves when it's done socially. And that means it's improved by empathy. We know that social learning is more memorable. There's a way of modeling learning, a way of sort of reasoning about it called the affective context model, which says that we learn things best when they are attached to emotions. This is one area where we cannot remove emotions without it being less effective. When people learn in isolation, when people go to self-service places for learning, they see completion rates typically less than 10%, whereas the social learning completion rate is typically more than 90%. And that's because it's social, because people are learning with peers. They're learning from someone who has done the same job before, who understands their challenges, and they get all of those social benefits around the learning. The human connection pulls people to attend, but it also means that they learn better as a result. Now, I write all the talks I do with one of my co-founders, Hayley, and for the first time in about 20 talks that we've done together, I had to write this one without her. She made me promise that I would spend 15 seconds explaining SkillAware, and so this is her input to the talk that I was not allowed to veto. So I am sorry to do this, but please indulge me for Hayley's sake. We do learning for software engineering teams. We work out what each person can and can't do so we can fit the learning around the person rather than fitting the person into the learning. And we accelerate learning by experience. We have a live expert coach, so it feels much more like pair programming than attending a lecture. And the result is that people attend, they learn socially and deeply, and it has a measurable impact. If you would like to see what I mean, if you'd like to make Hayley's day, or if you just want to come and chat about empathy, please do come and see me on the stand upstairs, and thank you for your attention. I will hand back to Luke or Titan.